Welcome to Innovation and Leadership. I'm Jess Larson. Today on the show, we've got Marc Preston.
I mean, one interesting thing that I learned from Honda, actually, and from my MBA is that a lot of people call it that strategic intent and sort of say, I want to get there, over there in the future. I believe it's possible to do new energy. I believe it's possible to do an electric race car. That's my strategic intent.
This is part 2 of our interview. So, Marc, for anybody who missed part 1, can you give us just the 30-second on how you guys got to the top of Formula E and in fact, what Formula E is for anybody who might not know?
Sure. Formula E started about 4 years ago. It was the brainchild of Alejandro Agag and the FIA, John Todd. They wanted to look at the future of motor racing. So we race electric racing cars in the first 4 years of the series, which is just finished. We had to have 2 cars per driver because the technology hadn't kind of caught up with where we needed to be. Now we have 1 car per driver for season 5, and that starts in Riyadh in a month, in December. We'll be racing with 12 races, or 12 events and 13 races around the world. We'll get to New York, Paris, places like Riyadh, Marrakesh, and South America and Mexico. So, yeah, all around the world. We won the Drivers' Championship last year, and that was an amazing ride because we'd only really started our new team, Techeetah, in season 3. So after 2 seasons as the only customer team in the sport, we won the Drivers' Championship and went down with the wire with Audi and came second in the Teams' Championship. So we've had an exciting ride over this last year.
Yeah. So you were talking about, after being one of the principal designers for McLaren and working with Honda after that, and now being team principal over here at Techeetah, how you really have to expand. The buck stops at you. You kind of take care of the big picture. One of the things that you talked about was marketing, and I want to talk about this because when you think about folks who are trying to transform an organization from the inside, maybe it's a bit too bureaucratic or they want to become more innovative, they really need to market internally and win over the hearts and minds of their own organization, right?
Yes.
And then for anybody else who's innovating their products, they have to attract the customers, right? Or they won't be innovating that product very long. Do I understand you guys are the only independent team in Formula E, or am I saying that wrong?
In season 4, 3 and 4, we were the only independent team. Now we have a factory team with us. So now we're with DS. So we become, I suppose, what's called a factory team.
Okay. And can you talk about the business of F1 and what it takes to attract a DS to come with you on something like this?
Yeah, I mean, just going back to your original question about marketing internally, actually a few of the sponsors we've had over the last few years have actually joined Formula E to show internally that they are looking at the future, that the future is important, that they're interested in technology, interested in change, looking at what's happening in the world. So a lot of those companies that sponsor us have internal marketing budgets and communications. So there's often a department internally that communicates what they're doing in Formula E and why they're doing it and why they're looking at the future and what they think about how the world is changing. Externally, Formula E is a great place to be because we're hopefully leading the future. It's just sort of digressing for a second. It's amazing about 4 years ago when we first started in Formula E that nobody really wanted to talk to us. It's amazing how fast it's changed. I can't describe how fast the opinions have changed in motor racing and in automotive to join Formula E. It's really exponential, the growth of the series, and that's one of the reasons why sponsors and partners want to be involved in the series is because it's changing rapidly. You see China pushing really hard on EVs for clean air. It's up until now, I think a lot of the emphasis has been on CO2, of course, emissions. But you know what? When you can actually touch and feel pollution, that really makes a difference. And so, China's pushing very hard on clean air, as is a lot of the European countries, the US, a lot of the places around the world are pushing towards cleaner air. There's a lot of discussion on sustainability. We see a lot of things going on in energy. I think you said you used to be in energy. I'm amazed at little things like, did you know that the UK has run on no coal for one day for the first time since the Industrial Revolution? There's, big parameters like that changing around the world. So Formula E, let's say, embodies what's happening, embodies the pioneering spirit of changing the industry that I started in, 30 years ago when I left university. So it's an exciting place to be, and I think that is something that sponsors and partners want to be involved in, and they want to be seen to be part of that and to be pushing that change in the world. We've got a sponsor of ours is Efisec. They're a Portuguese company who does fast chargers, and so they've joined us in order to showcase their technology to help us with our charging with the cars, help us make less errors and do a better job at keeping the batteries alive and energy management. So they want to express to the world that they're at the forefront of what's happening in this world. Of course, DS likes the fact that we're a winning team. DS has come with us because of our parent company is based in China. So our team is actually runs under a Chinese license. So we have the Chinese flag, let's say, on our car. So that's a big market for the industry. That's a big market for DS. They're interested in being in China in a big way. So this whole change in the world, sustainability, green energy, those kind of things are all part of what Formula E stands for. And people basically want to be involved and tell the world that they are and show the world how they are involved in this big change.
Yeah. And can you talk about your choice? Obviously you were getting into this before it was the most popular thing around, and you had come from the highest heights of the more traditional part of the sport. Can you talk about your choice to come over?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was interesting because, of course, when I first left university, I knew nothing about electric cars, never even considered there'd be such a thing as an electric car, let alone an autonomous car, for that matter. When I finished at McLaren, I actually did my MBA at Oxford University, and funnily enough, started the Formula One team at the same time, which was a bit crazy. But what it meant was when the Formula One team had finished, I started helping some spin-out companies from Oxford University, one called Oxford Yasa Motors, which is an electric motor company, and another one at the time was called T-Tech, which was a tidal energy company that was spinning out of Oxford. And that got me interested in the world of renewables and what was happening next. And I felt at the time that Formula One wasn't really going forward into the future and changing things the way I like to change things. I mean, Formula One, when I first came into it, felt like we were learning all the time. But then over time, I suppose things weren't changing dramatically enough. And I started to get involved in electric cars and stuff. And when the FIA first put the tender out for supplying electric race cars, the composites company I was working at the time, we pitched for the tender for the cars. Alejandro got the project in the end and was the one behind it all. And then we joined, very, very early on. It was funny. A lot of our ex-colleagues in Formula One just said, you're mad. What are you doing that for? But now they all want to be involved, funnily enough, only 4 years later, which shows how quickly it's changed. It's really surprising how negative people were back in 2013, 14, and how that's changed so much to 2018, which is a great thing because it means that, the sport's heading in the right way. And, we're all heading in the right way with this whole push towards green energy and different powertrains, etc. So it's quite phenomenal to be involved in that. And I like being pioneering. And as I learned, at the very beginning of F1, I enjoy going too far over the edge, going to the edge of the envelope. So this is the edge of the envelope. I remember when we first started talking to one of the guys, McLaren, I think it was, and Williams about batteries. And I said, how does this work? And they said, I don't know. We're still all learning, aren't we? And that was how new it was at the beginning of Formula E. Now, we've all learned a hell of a lot more since then. And those guys did an amazing job at getting these electric race cars off the ground. But now it's, going from strength to strength. We have 9 manufacturers in the series this year. I think there's another one when Porsche and Mercedes join properly next year. The competition's super high, and I really hope we're going to push really far the boundaries of electric cars and electric racing.
That's awesome. Well, let's take a quick break from our sponsor, and makes me think of some questions I want to ask you as soon as we get back. So, Marc, right before the sponsor break, I was thinking about this world, and I guess from an investment banking background, I have some ideas about how you put a real estate deal together, how you do venture funding for a tech startup, or some of the energy company acquisitions I was a part of, right? But for people who don't understand the scope of starting an F1 team, I mean, without sharing any secret sauce, I mean, how big are the numbers as far as dollars people need to put together, and how big an effort is this?
So, I mean, if Formula One, Formula One's budgets, you can see there on the internet, go as high as 300 or 400 million without pounds. That is, you can read on the internet about what Mercedes. I think they put their company accounts out last week. We were probably only a tenth of that at the moment. So Formula E is a lot cheaper than Formula One. We have caps on the costs of things, and that helps to keep the prices down of the sport at the moment. So that's important. When we started the Formula One team with Super Aguri and Honda, basically they wanted to do another team. So at the time, we were putting together a technical plan to start a Formula One team, and they were looking for a group of people that could deliver on that. So that's how we got the whole deal came together with Honda, Super Aguri, and a bunch of guys that had worked together previously. So I think they always say a lot of it's to do with timing, isn't it? And it was just the right time that we were pitching that. In terms of Formula E, I'm a bit of a believer in standing in the middle of the road and waiting for the car to hit you. And what I mean is be at the right time at the right place. You know what I mean?
Yes, but a much more visual version of the cliche.
Yeah. So I've always put myself in when I first said to people I wanted to start a Formula One team, they said I was an idiot. And when I said I wanted to start a Formula E team, they said I was an idiot. But so I think to be ahead, it's sometimes, most people would say wouldn't have the guts to do it. But that comes from all those people I've worked with in Formula One, where they always want to go over the edge, too far. Let's say.
And I want to talk about this because how do you make your decision of, okay, everybody says I'm an idiot, I really want to do this. Am I the one who's out of tune, or are they the ones who are out of tune? How do you, knowing that you're going to make mistakes sometimes and they're going to be wrong sometimes, what aids you in making that decision of, man, the feedback I'm getting is not positive here, but I'm feeling strong about it? How do you balance that out yourself?
I mean, one interesting thing that I learned from Honda, actually, and from my MBA is that a lot of people call that strategic intent and sort of say, I want to get over there in the future. I believe it's possible to do new energy. I believe it's possible to do an electric race car. That's my strategic intent. I think I've heard a great story from Honda when they do Formula One. They do it so that their engineers believe the impossible is doable, let's say. So when they're in Formula One, they have large budgets, they have amazing people, very incredible resources to do the Formula One development. And I almost think that almost anything's possible sometimes, certainly in motorsport, because some days you think something's impossible, the next day you find a solution. It's just incredible when you've got a really smart bunch of people around you. So I think if you see something that looks possible and doable, and you think that you're at the forefront, and as always, I suppose we all think we're the smartest people in the room, then if you think it's possible, but let's say 30 or 40% of people are saying it's doable and 60% are saying it's not, then maybe you're in the right place. That's certainly sometimes how I think. And I've read a few things that I think from some of the famous generals say similar things. You don't need 100% certainty. Maybe I think some generals say it's 70%. Some people say it's just below the 50%. So I suppose it's that feeling of from your experience, you're pretty sure it's doable. And if there's a couple of other people saying it's doable and a lot of people saying it's not, then maybe you're in the right place. That's, I suppose, when you feel like you're pioneering, let's say.
Yeah. I'm thinking about when you were talking about on the first episode how people don't realize just how far Ferrari pushes things, for instance, right? And that kind of what a benefit you got to have a mentor early in your career to help you think about that. And it's obviously look at how you're doing it yourself. So Mylan, we've got all these corporate clients, and I'm thinking about a large banking institution client of ours, and I'm thinking specifically one of the leaders. They have some folks who are really out there making a lot of business for the bank, and then he's got some other folks who are not. He says they don't have enough fire in the belly, and I'm interested if you have any thoughts of if you were advising someone like that to help people want to push it to the limit and want to maybe become a bit more ambitious. If you'd have any advice for leaders or managers who want to surround people with the idea of possibilities and pushing.
I think what I find is you have to have room to experiment. And, often I do my things myself. I just bought myself a Renault Zoe. Might sound crazy, but I bought a little electric car originally, and that's what we started Street Drone from. I bought a Renault Twizy to play around with an electric car and to learn about it. It only cost me £5,000, so it wasn't a ridiculous amount of money. So if it all went wrong, okay, I'll lose some money, but it's not too crazy. So I think sometimes you have to have controlled experimentation, and I'm not sure what that might be, but let's say in motor racing, we want to experiment with how we warm up the tires or how we run a certain piece of software. You can do sort of small increments and do experimentation that's bounded, let's say. So if someone's in a bank, obviously they could buy billions of dollars of some sort of shorting things, which is obviously not the right way to experiment. But certainly, I certainly like the incremental experimentation when you're not sure how far you can go. So I found myself often with motorsport where we went a little bit over the edge of the envelope. We knew where we were now, and we knew where we thought what was possible. So we would say, okay, we can go a little bit over the limits because we think this may or may not work because we don't have models to support this hypothesis. So let's do a hypothesis and go a little bit over the limit. Maybe we're actually right or wrong, actually, and you can go further than we thought because the models have never been done. But maybe sometimes you were right and you do go over the edge, but you can also know that you can come back. So how do you find a way to experiment? Experiment, fail fast, fail early, as they say, but not fail with potentially too much risk. So I suppose in motor racing, we do take risk, but we don't take a ridiculous amount of risk. And we also always know where we can come back to if this new idea doesn't work. So I don't mean go and buy, Coca-Cola tomorrow and then realize you made a mistake, but you might be able to experiment with theories. And as people gain confidence, then you can let people experiment. Maybe the people who do make the bigger calls in those banks, maybe they just got more experience and maybe they have a way of experimenting themselves that you don't realize potentially, that they actually increment quite quickly and find the limits. I don't believe often people can just make one big bet and get it right. So I think, how do you experiment? How do you tease where the edge of the envelope is without, let's say, breaking the bank?
Yeah. Now, on the other side of things, when you think about the other side, not the experimentation side, but the reliability side, the drivers get so much attention, but I mean, the level of reliability from your pit crews or the rest of the staff is pretty incredible of a feat. There's so many organizations that wish they had a culture of that level of precision and performance and reliability. Do you have any advice about taking lessons from Formula One or Formula E pit crews to the rest of the kind of organizations the rest of us run?
Yeah, I mean, my uncle once gave me a nice diagram, which imagine there's a person pushing a rock up a hill, a big rock. And that's like pushing performance up a hill. You slowly work your way up the hill. But if you don't put let's say a chock, you know what I mean? A wedge under the rock,
wedge.
Yeah. It'll roll backwards. So when I went back to my point about what I learned so much about McLaren was the way they codify experience, and they put in processes and procedures to not make the same silly mistakes again. That is incredibly important. So to me, that's like the wedge under the rock. Sometimes I've been at teams where things go up and down all the time because people don't write things down, they don't codify things, they don't make processes and procedures to stop the silly errors, because, we all make mistakes, and sometimes we've had to follow route learning in some ways. So the guys in the pit stops, they practice and practice and practice to be able to do the same thing exactly the same way every time, just like a golfer or another sports person, and just like a driver. They can practice back at the factory, but we also have a lot of processes and procedures that go behind that. So quality is super important. We made a couple of mistakes last year. So did Audi. They won the team's championship. We won the drivers' championship. And a lot of it came down to not making errors, basically. And so on one hand, you're always trying to push too far over the edge. But on the other hand, the things that work, you need to make sure that they're set in stone. The way that person pumps up the tires, the way that person takes a wheel nut off the car is always the same way, until someone comes along with something better and you experiment and maybe try it and say, yep, that is better. Right, change the procedure, change the process, do it now the same way every time until one of us, anybody, mechanic, engineer, comes up with another idea. So it's that pushing the rock up the hill kind of idea. If you're going faster, you should be going up the hill. And every time you go up a little bit further, make sure you put the wedge in and don't go backwards, basically.
And so
don't go backwards.
And so what does putting the wedge in look like for you guys? Is it written? Does somebody shoot a little video of it? Do guys sit in the room and review it and then go out to the car and watch it, and they have to do it 100 times until everybody knows they can do it perfectly? Like, what does that look like tangibly?
So you start with the basic things like what pressure of the wheel gun's at, what wheel nut do we use, what grease do we use in the wheel nut, all those very basic things, they're written down and they're codified, let's say. And that's the written down stuff. But then the actual physical movement that the mechanics have to do, for example, to change the wheels or to make a change to a battery or to change an engine, that all comes down to stepping through it in a logical fashion. But then that requires people to learn it. So that's the physical side of it. So then we'll have some videos, like you say, so they can watch the way they do things. They can even change the way where they stand, which side of the car they stand on. If they're trying to change something very quickly, you'll do things like you'll lay out all the tools with green sticky tape on them, let's say, to say the green ones are what you need to use to do this procedure, so that there's no thinking required almost. When you go to the toolbox, you grab the ones with the green stickers because that means the left-hand side of the car, and maybe the red stickers might mean the right-hand side of the car. So you reduce errors. You reduce every eventuality, take out all the randomness in the process to make sure it's just, it happens over and over again exactly the same way.
Yeah. And is it just meaningful repetitions of practice it enough times until they have the muscle memory of it? Or how does that?
Yeah, you do muscle memory, but then you also do things, as I say, like colors. So you might have colors on tools. You might have other aids. You might have some signs and things to say what you've got to do. So, you'll have a sign on the car that says, make sure to take this thing off the car before you start the car. And just lots of things to remind you.
Kind of error-proofing?
Every time. Yeah, error-proofing, basically. You go through everything and just reduce any problem. So if there is a problem, then you all look at the videos. You all figure out, why did that go wrong? We have things called fault lists where, we have things I said before, car stoppers, things that happen that stop the car running. They're number one to fix. And then number twos might be problems that we can get away with, but we really should fix. So that might be things to make things faster. And so you just work down the lists methodically, look at why the problem happened, look at what you can fix, come up with ideas about how to fix it, and then implement them either written down or in tools or procedures as time goes on.
I love it. Well, obviously, everybody should be checking you guys out. Go to dstecheetah.com, which is DSTE cheetah, like the animal.com. You guys are all over on social. And anything else that you would tell people who want to find out more about the team and Formula E in general?
Yeah, just follow us on that. You can also, I'm not sure what channels people will be watching, but you can look up the ABB FIA Formula E Championship. They've got an app, so you'll be able to download an app on iOS and Google, and you can follow the teams and you can see when the next races are and follow drivers and check out the first race in Riyadh.
This has been great. Thanks so much for making time for us.
No problem. Thank you.
Well, that's it for the episode. One other thing I wanted to tell you about, if you remember the guys from Convoy in episodes back, Ken Free and Trent Mano, I went on one of their CEO trips to New York and I met a guy named Brent Thompson, very successful entrepreneur. He was former CEO of Jive Communications, big company now, I think $300 or $400 million. Anyways, he started a new company called blipbillboards.com. I'm super stoked they're a sponsor now. But I remember a year and some ago when I met him, I thought it was genius. Instead of having to buy 6 months or a year's worth of billboard for thousands of dollars, you can buy 8 seconds at a time for like 10 or 20 cents. You pick what billboard you want it on, what time of day you want it to run. And it just puts so much power in the hands of marketers and CEOs who want to try something and see if it works. You can buy as many or as few as you want, change it as many times as you want. I think now our podcast is being advertised on billboards in like 18 different states because we have these guys as sponsors. We're pretty excited about it. Hope you check out blipbillboards.com. Thanks.